All right, let's dive in headfirst into Marseille. But not the Marseille you see on postcards, no. We're going deep into the city's underbelly, the world of Marseille's gangs. And we've got a whole mountain of sources for this one. YouTube documentaries, news segments, even a true crime podcast we found, all painting a picture of how these gangs have taken root and evolved over time.
And what's really fascinating is how deeply intertwined this criminal activity is with Marseille's history. It's not some recent phenomenon. It's baked into the city's politics, its culture, going back decades.
So let's start with the OGs, right? The Corsican Mafia. They pretty much ran the show in Marseille's underworld for a good chunk of the 20th century.
Yeah.
Taking advantage of the chaos after World War I, the city's port was booming, corruption was rampant. It was like a gangster's paradise.
Oh, yeah. It was the perfect breeding ground for organized crime. Figures like Paul Carbone, a notorious gangster, and Simon Sabiani, a powerful politician. They formed this really convenient alliance, a classic case of clientelism.
Clientelism.
Yeah, so think of it like a system built on favors and obligations. Those in power, like Sabiani, they exchange favors for loyalty and support. Sort of like a social contract, but with a very dark side.
I see.
Even Sabiani's own daughter, she told stories about people lining up outside their home, begging her father for favors, everything from jobs to getting out of legal trouble. It just shows you how deeply this system was woven into Marseille's fabric.
Wow. So how did this clientelism help the Corsican Mafia specifically?
It gave them protection, a sense of legitimacy, you know. The politicians turned a blind eye to their rackets in exchange for muscle, for votes, and the Corsican Mafia, they used that influence to line their own pockets. Early on, it was smuggling, prostitution. They really capitalized on Marseille's location.
A gateway to North Africa, and from there, the world.
Right, and then things escalated.
That's when the French connection comes in.
Exactly. In the 1960s, they partnered with the American Mafia, and suddenly Marseille is this global hub for heroin trafficking.
It's crazy to think that...
Get this. At its peak, they were supplying an estimated 80%. 80% of the heroin consumed in the United States came through Marseille.
80%. That's staggering. That must have had a huge impact, not just on the drug trade itself, but on both sides of the Atlantic, in terms of law enforcement, drug policy, everything.
Oh, absolutely. It left a permanent mark on Marseille, solidifying its reputation as a major player in the global drug trade.
It's a fascinating and dark chapter. And in one of our sources, there's this whole story about a World War II hero, a resistance fighter, who later becomes a key player in the French Connection.
Yeah, it really makes you think about morality, about the complexities of human nature.
Like, where do you draw the line? Can past heroism excuse present-day criminality?
It definitely challenges that black and white view of good versus evil.
So with all this money and power flowing from the French Connection, what happens when the authorities start cracking down?
Well, things get messy. In the 1970s, law enforcement disrupts the French Connection, and the Corsican Mafia plunges into this violent power struggle. It became known as the Godfather's War.
Godfather's War. Sounds ominous.
It was brutal, different factions vying for control. And there's this one source that describes this chilling scene. The fate of a rogue associate is being decided, and they're using this cup with balls method. It's almost identical to a scene from the movie The Godfather.
Wow, you have to wonder if the filmmakers were inspired by what was happening in Marseille.
It's a chilling thought.
So what happens to the Corsican Mafia after all this infighting?
Well, by the 1990s, their grip starts to weaken. Years of conflict, crackdowns by law enforcement, the drug trade was changing too.
So they're on the decline.
Yeah, their era was coming to an end.
Which means a new era was about to begin.
Exactly, and it would be in the northern quarters of Marseille, plagued by poverty and unemployment, where a new generation of gangsters would rise.
As the old guard faded, something new was brewing. These weren't your classic gangsters in pinstripe suits making shady deals. This was a new generation, born and raised in those tough neighborhoods, in the northern quarters of Marseille.
And that shift is crucial to understanding how the criminal landscape evolved. The decline of the Corsican Mafia, it left a vacuum. And into that vacuum stepped these younger, more ruthless gangs, often with roots in the city's North African communities.
We've talked about the poverty, the unemployment in those areas, but can you go a bit deeper into what specific conditions fueled this rise in gang activity?
Absolutely. We're talking about systemic issues here. Lack of access to quality education, very limited job opportunities, a sense of being completely excluded. These factors created this breeding ground for resentment. Like, the traditional paths to success, they're just not there.
So joining a gang, it starts to look like the only viable option.
Exactly, especially for young people who are looking for power, respect, even just a sense of belonging.
It's bleak, but it makes sense. When you have nothing to lose, the risks associated with crime, they seem less daunting.
Right, and it wasn't just petty crime. These gangs quickly took control. Whole neighborhoods, they essentially became the ruling authority.
It's like they created their own parallel society.
They had sophisticated systems, surveillance, enforcement. They turned these housing estates into their own personal fiefdoms.
Which brings us back to Ross Kemp and his experiences. He went into those areas controlled by these gangs and saw this firsthand. I remember you mentioning the surveillance systems they used. It sounded really intense.
Oh, it was. Kemp described this network of lookouts. They call them shufs. They're positioned all throughout the estates, constantly monitoring everything.
Not just a few guys hanging around on street corners.
No, this is organized. This is strategic. These guys are vigilant. They don't miss a thing.
So they weren't just looking for rivals. They were watching out for the police, too.
Of course. They were the first line of defense, alerting the network to any potential threats, rivals, police, anything.
It's amazing they got away with it for so long.
Well, they had ways to communicate. Mobile phones, hand signals, even coded messages.
So even with the police trying to crack down, the gangs had the upper hand.
In many ways, yeah, the lookouts gave them a huge advantage, allowed them to evade capture, maintain control of their operations. It was a constant game of cat and mouse with law enforcement, and often the gangs were winning.
And Kemp experienced that directly. They attacked his car while he was filming.
Yeah, and that wasn't all. They were prepared for anything.
No.
Kemp described seeing ice blocks, steel balls, all ready to go to attack intruders.
This shows you how prepared they were, how ruthless.
They weren't just reacting. They had planned for every eventuality.
It's almost like a military operation.
It's a very apt comparison. They operated with discipline, organization, like a professional military unit, and unfortunately, like any military operation, there were casualties.
And that brings us to one of the most disturbing aspects of all this. The teen hitmen. Kids recruited through encrypted messaging apps, some of them as young as 14. It's hard to wrap your head around that.
It's a complex issue, for sure, but what we see in the sources is that these kids, they're lured in by promises of money, status, belonging. Things are often lacking in their own lives.
They're vulnerable, easy to manipulate.
Absolutely. These older gang members, they exploit that desperation, that desire for acceptance.
It's a tragedy. These kids are robbed of their childhoods, their futures.
And in many cases, their lives.
It's a reminder that we can't just focus on law enforcement. We have to address the root causes that are pushing these kids towards gangs.
100%. We need to invest in these communities, create opportunity.
Show these young people that there's a different path, a better way.
But we also have to recognize this isn't just a local issue. These gangs are connected to international criminal networks. Drugs, weapons, human trafficking, it crosses borders.
It's a global problem.
Exactly, requiring a global response, international cooperation, intelligence sharing. We need a coordinated effort to disrupt these networks, to dismantle their operations.
It's a daunting task.
But it all comes back to addressing those root causes. Poverty, inequality, lack of opportunity, that's where it starts.
It's clear that law enforcement has a huge role to play, but there's this sense of frustration among the police in Marseille. One officer even said, it's like trying to empty the ocean with a bucket.
Yeah, that feeling comes up a lot in the sources. Law enforcement faces these immense challenges trying to dismantle these networks. The gangs are adaptable, resilient. They're always one step ahead.
It's a constant battle.
And it's taking a toll on the morale of those on the front lines.
One source even talked about the dangers the police face themselves. They're often targeted by the gangs, threats, intimidation, violence.
It's a dangerous job. They're putting their lives on the line every day.
So if traditional law enforcement isn't enough, what other solutions are there? Our sources mentioned social programs, economic development initiatives.
There's a growing recognition that we need a multifaceted approach. It's not just about arresting gang members, it's about addressing those underlying issues, the social and economic factors that contribute to their recruitment.
So what does that look like, practically speaking?
It means investing in education, job training, community development programs. It means creating opportunities, showing young people there's a future beyond the streets.
A future beyond the gangs.
Exactly. Providing support services for families, those struggling with poverty, addiction, violence.
One of our sources really focused on the role of mentorship programs. There's such a need for positive role models in these communities.
It's crucial. A lot of these young people, they've never had anyone who believed in them, someone who encouraged them, pushed them to pursue their dreams.
Mentorship can provide that support, help them build self-esteem, develop life skills.
It's about giving these kids hope for a future where they can escape the cycle.
The cycle of poverty and violence.
It's about investing in their potential, helping them realize they have the power to change their lives.
It sounds like there's a lot of good work being done, but this is a long-term battle.
Oh, absolutely. It's going to require sustained effort, collaboration.
A willingness to address those complex social and economic issues.
There's no quick fix, no easy solution.
This is about creating lasting change.
And it requires a shift in perspective, right?
We need to move beyond this good guys versus bad guys narrative.
We need to recognize the shared humanity of everyone involved, victims and perpetrators.
It's about finding that balance between compassion and justice.
Exactly, recognizing that everyone deserves a chance at redemption.
Even those who have committed terrible acts.
It's not about condoning their actions, it's about recognizing their humanity.
So moving forward, the fight against gang violence, it's not just about law enforcement or social programs. It's about changing hearts and minds, fostering empathy, building a society that values peace.
A society that values justice and opportunity for all.
And one thing that really struck me in our research was the role of women in all this. It's not just a male-dominated world, is it?
No, you're right. Our sources revealed a surprising number of women involved in Marseille's criminal underworld, both as victims and perpetrators.
There was one documentary that focused on this group of women running a drug-dealing operation out of their apartment. They were tough, resourceful, and completely ruthless.
It challenges that stereotype of women being passive bystanders in organized crime. They're active participants, often driven by the same motivations as men: poverty, desperation, the desire for power.
But we can't forget, women are also often the victims of this violence.
Of course, they're vulnerable to exploitation, abuse, trafficking. Our sources highlighted the growing problem of sex trafficking in Marseille, young women being forced into prostitution by the gangs.
The horrifying reality.
And one that demands our attention and intervention.
This violence, it has a ripple effect, impacting families, entire communities.
And those impacts, they're often intergenerational. The trauma of witnessing violence, losing loved ones, being involved in criminal activity, it can have lasting consequences, shaping the lives of children, future generations.
It's heavy stuff, but amidst all the darkness, there are glimmers of hope. Our sources highlighted the work being done by community organizations, social workers, educators.
There are people on the ground working tirelessly to break the cycle, to create opportunities for young people to thrive.
Running after-school programs, providing mentorship, job training.
Advocating for policies that address those root causes: poverty, inequality.
One documentary focused on this youth center, in the heart of a gang-controlled neighborhood. They were offering a safe haven for kids, a place to escape the violence.
A place to connect with positive role models, to develop their talents.
It's an example of the impact community-based initiatives can have.
Giving young people positive alternatives, creating a sense of hope.
It's about investing in the future generation, empowering them to create a better future.
For themselves and for their communities.
So while the situation in Marseille is complex and challenging, there are reasons to be cautiously optimistic.
There's a growing awareness, a willingness to confront the problem, and there are dedicated people working to make a difference.
We read about former gang members who are now mentors themselves, dedicated to steering young people away from that life.
That kind of commitment, it's incredibly powerful.
One journalist, who's been covering the gang wars for years, he said, "Marseille is a city of contradictions. It's a place of beauty and violence, of hope and despair. But I believe in the people of this city. I believe that we can find a way out of this darkness."
It's a powerful statement. It acknowledges the challenges, but it also highlights the resilience.
The resilience of the human spirit.
Exactly.
It's inspiring to hear about those fighting for change, but it feels almost overwhelming. Like, how do we actually make a dent in a problem this big?
You're right. There's no easy answer. It's not a single solution. It's going to take a multi-pronged approach, different strategies working together, more police on the streets. That might disrupt things in the short term, sure, but it doesn't address the root of the problem.
You got to treat the disease, not just the symptoms.
Exactly, and that's where those long-term solutions come in. Tackling poverty, improving access to education, creating real job opportunities. Those are the foundations of a more stable and just society.
One community leader in the northern quarters, he said something that really resonated. He said, "We can't arrest our way out of this problem. We need to invest in our communities, give our children a chance to succeed."
It's a powerful statement. It shifts the focus from punishment to prevention. It's not just about cracking down on gangs. It's about changing the environment, making it harder for those gangs to take root in the first place.
And we've talked about the young people who are drawn into gangs. But what about the kids who are just growing up in these neighborhoods, surrounded by violence, even if they're not directly involved?
That's a crucial point. The psychological toll on these children is immense. There was this one documentary, this young girl, maybe 10 years old, and she was talking about being afraid to leave her apartment because of the shootings, the constant threat of violence.
It's heartbreaking. And those experiences, they leave scars.
They do, and those scars can have long-lasting effects. Increased risk of mental health problems, substance abuse, even falling into criminal activity themselves.
The cycle perpetuates itself.
Exactly. That's why early intervention is so vital. We need to provide these children with support, help them process their trauma, build resilience, find healthy ways to cope.
One of our sources talked about this organization in Marseille. They offer therapy, counseling specifically for children affected by gang violence. They also do parenting workshops, community outreach, helping families cope with the stress.
That's so important, recognizing the human cost of this violence, providing support for those who are struggling to deal with the aftermath. But it's not just about healing the past, it's also about creating hope for the future.
That seems to be a recurring theme, showing these kids there's another way, that their lives don't have to be defined by violence and fear.
Exactly, and that's where education, mentorship, community programs come in. They offer alternatives, opportunities to explore, to learn, to grow.
So Marseille's in a tough spot, but it's not hopeless.
No, not at all. There's a growing awareness. People are willing to face the problem head on. There are people doing incredible work trying to make a difference.
We read about former gang members who are now mentors themselves, trying to steer young people away from the path they once took.
That kind of dedication is so inspiring.
One journalist who's covered the gang wars for years, he said, "Marseille is a city of contradictions, beauty and violence, hope and despair.
Yeah.
But I believe in the people of this city. I believe we can find a way out of this darkness."
It's a powerful message. It acknowledges the darkness, but also the strength, the resilience.
The resilience of the human spirit.
And that's what we have to hold on to.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Marseille's gangs, what's the takeaway for our listeners?
I think the key takeaway is that this isn't just a Marseille problem. It's a global issue. It's about addressing poverty, inequality, lack of opportunity, wherever they exist. It's about promoting peace, understanding, empathy, building a world where every child has a chance to thrive.
We've explored the history, the tactics, the impact, the potential solutions. It's been a heavy journey, but an important one.
It has, but knowledge is power. The more we understand these issues, the better equipped we are to be part of the solution.
So to everyone listening, we encourage you to learn more, to explore the sources we've discussed. Think about how you can contribute, whether it's supporting local organizations, advocating for policy changes, or just raising awareness. Every action counts.
Every action can make a difference.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
We'll see you next time.